Well, after a short delay there, while we got everything hooked up again, I'd like to welcome you. I'm Donnell McAdams, and we're here today for a project called Bless Your Hearts. And this is going to be using the Hearts templates, which I'm going to show you here in just a moment. I'll switch off to the picture so that you can see the project. This is not what I want on the screen. Thank you. So this is the project that we're going to be doing. It's an 18-inch square, and we are going to learn several ways that we can use the hearts. In this particular project, I only used the 2-inch and the 4-inch hearts. And this is the Westerly Design template set that we are using, and this comes with a set of 6 hearts. Now you can purchase just a couple of the pieces. You can just get the ones we use, or you can use the whole set. So again, I'd like to welcome you back for this quilt along. I've missed you all, and that's why it took us a little bit of time to get started. We had to log in and give every bit of information I think that history-wise we had. So Megan is with me here today, and we would like to keep her busy with your interaction because this is a whole lot more fun if you ask questions, make comments, give us some likes, give us some thumbs up, because we want to make sure that we are giving you information that's going to make you a better quilter with the templates. So to get started, obviously I showed you those hearts. I want you to see that the ones we are going to be using, and I think maybe I'll just flip this project over because it's all red on the back, and maybe you'll be able to see from that. The ones we're going to be using are the 2-inch. How does that look on there? Can they see that? Mm-hmm. And then this is the 4-inch heart. So I'm using the 2-inch and the 4-inch, but with that set you also get clear up to 6 inches. So this is a very large one. This is the 5, this is the 3, and I'm going to move this aside because when I show you this, I always say this is the little itty-bitty 1-inch heart, and it is really tiny. So a lot of things that you can do with that whole set. It is one of those sets that will surprise you, and you're going to see how we can play with those different sizes. So I'm going to show you the handout now. I don't know if you have this already. And it should be linked off of the Sew Steady site so that you can get this. And it is a 3-page handout, and it tells you what you're going to be needing for both weeks. This is a 2-session, this week and next Wednesday. And it's showing you what you're going to need as far as the tools, the templates, the crosshair ruler, and that kind of thing. And then the second page is what we're going to spend quite a bit of time today doing, and that's marking, because this marking is important, and in this case the more you get done that way, the easier it is to stitch. And then of course the last page is the instructions. Now this does not have the instructions for next week. You will get those next week. So this is the handout, and we are going to go through what you need, and then we're going to actually work with our fabrics. So in the fabrics, I didn't give yardage because a lot of you are working out of your stash, and so it's easier just to tell you what you need. So of our main fabric, which in this case is this white fabric, we are going to need a 20 by 20 inch square. Now that's going to give us more room than we need. Obviously, I like to do my work and then cut it down to perfect. That's going to be what you're going to have for the front. The backing fabric is a 24-inch square of fabric, and you'll notice that that fabric is brought around to the front, so that's going to be what we see on the front, and it notes that right here in your instructions. We're going to use a 20-inch square of either fusible fleece or quilt batting. So if you're using fusible fleece, which was what I used Pellon 987F, you do not need to have any temporary basting spray. If you're going to use quilt batting, you're going to use a temporary basting spray. But in both cases, it's 20 by 20 inch square. Now with this size, you may get away with not even using a temporary basting spray. That's just your personal preference. I'm going to use 40 or 50 weight thread. Obviously, I have two colors here. I have a white thread that matched my background. You could use maybe a light pink if you wanted, so that's going to put in our different kind of designs that are our background filler. And then I just used a red for the front stitching. Now, none of these stitches are we going over and over, so you're not going to have a heavier spot in one place, so you're not going to have to worry about that. So,
and if you need the link, our friends at Sew Steady have put the link in the comments, so you can go to that link as well for the handouts.
So you could be getting that while we're talking here. So the link, I guess, is now in the comments section. That's great to know. And while we're stopped there for that, I will tell you and remind you that you can share this with your friends. You can do whatever you want as far as a project with this. So make sure that you are telling others about it, and you will be seeing that this is archived. So after today, when you get your project stuff together, all your supplies, you can sit down and watch what we're doing again, so you can see that as many times as you want. So back to our supplies, I mentioned the 2 and the 4-inch hearts. We're also going to be using this, what's called the 12-inch arc. And so for those of you that are not familiar with some of these terminologies, this is the 12-inch arc. It says it right on the template. I'll put that up there so you can see it. And it is a curve on one side and the straight edge. We're going to be using the straight edge for this project, but I want you to know that it's not 12 inches long. This piece isn't 12 inches long. We're going to be using the 8-point crosshair ruler. You can use either the 8.5 inch or the 12.5 inch, but it needs to be the 8-point. I had a project one time I was teaching, and I remember this lady had all kinds of issues, and I never even thought to ask her if she was using the 8-point, and she had a 6-point crosshair square, which has a lot of value in it, but for the design we were doing, we needed an 8-point. You will also need a spacing gauge, and the spacing gauge is what we are going to use to get our exactness when we're measuring. So for those of you that have never seen the spacing gauge, this is what it looks like, and it has a place so that you can put a ribbon on it. I put a ribbon on it just because of the fact that I like to be able to find it when I drop it on the floor. Other items that we're going to need our cutting equipment. We're going to need best press or some sort of a starch alternative. We also use June Taylor's Quilting Starch Savvy. I use the Frixion markers. You can use whatever you want, iron off, wash out markers, and we need a pressing surface and a steam iron. And I'm going to talk a little bit about irons today because I've been noticing on a lot of quilt groups out there, Facebook quilt groups, people are talking about irons and having issues with them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about irons in general. I'm not promoting any brand, but I'm going to just talk about the irons in general. And then as I put here the optional things, I use a 12-inch border ruler that I've actually designed, and I will show you that when we get to it. And then also next week we're going to be using the Quick Easy Miter binding tool, and we will need a point creaser and turner. So those are our basic supplies. Obviously you're going to have your other things in general. This is my grid grid glider. This is brand new from Sew Steady, just introduced at Fall Quilt Market, and it is like our regular glider that was just a plain cream color. This is my regular glider here, but I'm going to show you this one because it's a little bit larger, and in general it has a few more uses because if you notice here I have a cutout. So I could actually use this with my feed teeth up, which I have been doing because it makes it really nice to be able to use these grid lines, hence the name Grid Glider. So this has the same slipperiness that will allow you to move your fabric, but it also has lines, it has angles, it has things that make other things useful for you. So this comes with a backing on it. And it's hard to see the backing because it's almost the same color, but you could hear how I'm pulling that up, how good that sticks on there. So this is something that you may want to invest in. Of course, the two reasons we use a glider: it allows everything to smoothly move. but it also takes all of the where it's around the machine and makes this all just a uniform surface, so we don't have any variance where the machine and the table, my Sew Steady Wish table, join each other. So I'm going to set the project aside for right now, and we're going to talk a little bit about our fabric and how we get it cut, and we're actually going to even get up here to the cutting board, and I'm going to show you how that works. So I wanted to show you this because the first project, when I was first doing this, I used a fabric that was a little bit embossed. So these dots that are on there, I think you can see this, but these dots that are on here have a little bit of an embossing to it. And I was really surprised when I was doing it how that caught on my glider. It just didn't seem to want to glide as easily. And at this point, I was using it on the back and the front. So this is something to be considerate of when you're doing something like this. I decided when I changed my project idea and I wanted to use a red backing, I just didn't even use this at all. So that's just a bit of a side note to tell you something to consider. As we go through this, we're always learning. That's for sure. We're always learning.
Valerie and Kathy love the new glider, and they want to know, is that on your website? Where can they get that?
It is, and it's also on Sew Steady's site. I would love for you to support your local quilt store first. And while we're saying that, this Saturday, the 26th, is Local Quilt Shop Day. So most all quilt stores are having promotions and demonstrations and special events. So check your local quilt store. So a big shout out for local quilt stores. And if you have one where you purchase your supplies, make sure that you give them a try first, because definitely that's what I want to promote. And yes, we do have them on the website. So the thing that I really like about it is the fact that it is larger, and it just all the lines. And you'll notice here, right up close to this, there are lines that are already on your machine that you may not have noticed. So this line is dead center. When the needle comes down, that's dead center. So that lines up. And ironically, I've got a 5/8 inch line right there, and there's one right here. So all I had to do was get those points lined up, and so now all of these are true. So if I wanted to stitch something an inch out one way or 2 inches out another way, or even use an angle, I have the ability to do all of that. Now I've already set up my machine. I've got it threaded. I've got it threaded with the red thread because that's what we're going to be using first. Now I want to step over here to my cutting mat. And I've got my fabric laying here. This happens to be, we need a 24-inch square of this. And this happens to be 27 inches. So I have left this, I've pressed the crease out in my fabric where it was folded. But I put it back on here so you could see, and this is something that is definitely getting back to a lot of information that is basic quilting information, but I want to share it with you because some of you may not know this. When I have my quilt store, we tore our fabric. And the reason you tear the fabric is because it tears perfectly on grain. So back in the day when I was taking classes as far as 7th and 8th grader, we learned how to pull a thread to get straight a grain. But on cotton fabrics, all you have to do is tear them. Now, if you notice right here, this, even though this is all even, this is off a little bit. And you can see as I get down here to the end, it's all back where it should be. Well, if I were to have cut this, sometimes in a store, your grain is off that much. And if they're cutting this, all of this is wasted and you really can't get it back on grain. So I'm going to pull this back to where it was so you can see that it's like that. Now, if this is truly this way, and it is, I'm going to take this section and put that in one hand and go to the opposite side, and I'm just going to give that just a little bit of a tug. Oh, Speed Racer just went through there. I don't know if you guys saw that. But after I give that a tug, when I put this back down, I have pulled my fabric back on grain. So you will notice that at this end, it's perfect. They lay together along here, which that's not always the case, but in this case it is. And this side is now perfect. Torn edge, torn edge. So now what I want to do is I'm going to turn this completely around, and I'm using the lines on my cutting mat. And if you remember, this is one of those cutting mats that has lines. You can see my lines going through, which I'm going to show you. And right down here, even though this is not pressed, because I have taken the time to iron that out, I'm putting that on a line. This is hanging over about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to take my fabric, smooth it out across there, get my longer ruler, whichever one you're using. I'm going to lay that in place, and I'm going to give this a nice fresh cut. Now in this case we need 24 inches. So that's on the 27 there. And I'm just going to come down here and go right to to the 3 line, which will be 24 inches. Now, measure twice, cut once. If you're not sure about your math, count the spots, count the squares. So I've cut off this piece. And this piece is perfectly straight. I could use that in another project. I would want to cut off the raw edge there where I have torn it. Now, I only need 24-inch square. So I like to leave the wording on, so whatever's left over, if I need that information, I have it. So I'm going to, again, this is salvage. We can't use it. We're going to cut it off. I've got it laid straight across the bottom here. I'm going to take my ruler, line it up so that I can cut just that little edge off there. And let me tell you, learning about this will save you a lot of problems when you're working. If you're using fabric that's on grain, it's going to work with you instead of against you. Now again, I'm going to move that over to that 27 so it's lined up perfect. Part of that is because I know my ruler will still fit on down here. And I'm going to take this, and because I have already pressed that crease out, I don't have to worry about that part of it, because a crease in there would make it so when you cut it, you're not going to get the exact measurement that you want, because it might just stand up a little bit and give you more fabric. So now this is going to be part of my stash, and I have the information over here if for some reason I would need that. So I'm going to just take that and get that folded up nice and neat, and that's going to go into my stash. So now I have my 24-inch square. So I am going to be using this a little bit later, and I'm just going to leave this lay here right now. I have already used the same principles that I just showed you, and I have my 20-inch square that's going to be the top piece. Now in this case, I have to think through this, and I put this in the instructions. We're going to be doing all of those markings. I'll have to find my handout. I'm not sure where I put it. There it is. We're going to be doing all of these markings. I'm going to walk you through that. And I would certainly not want to get all of those markings on and then have to fuse my fleece to the back of this. So I need to fuse my fleece first and then do my markings. So I'm going to take, this is the wrong side here. And on fleece, there's a little bit of a roughness. That's actually the glue. And I'm going to lay that right on top. Now I have to tell you, just a week or so ago when I was doing a project, I had my iron, I'm just going to say spit up, all over my fabric. I was almost in tears. Some of you have experienced that.
You gotta laugh from that one.
Okay. So you've experienced that, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I just want to leave it there till tomorrow. No, you can't do that. You got to do something with it right now. Well, I will tell you, I ran to the sink. I got some cool water in there. I put just a little bit of detergent in. That did nothing to it. So I grabbed my shout bottle and I sprayed shout all over it and I started rubbing it and it came right out. Now, I was also doing a lot of praying too, so that helped a lot there. But I'm going to tell you that you can prevent some of that, and here's the way you're going to do it. So we're going to turn around here and go to the ironing board. I just about knocked my iron off. And this is my big board. It's been used. You can see spots on it. But I am going to lay this down. I'm going to get this lined up. And a couple of hints. When you fill your iron, make sure you're filling it with the type of water that they tell you to. In my case, it does not like distilled water. So I'm using filtered water, which I have a filter on my water here at the house, so that's what I use. And the other thing that I did not know until I was doing a little bit of research is they say to not fill your iron when it's warm, because that water hits inside that warm or that hot vessel that's in there, and that causes problems, kind of like throwing water into a hot skillet. So that was something that I learned. So I make sure that I try to let my iron cool a little bit, or if it's just the first of the time, fill it up. But I want to, as you know, it's shut off. So you see what's happening here? I'm seeing more of that. And that's really what you want to do before you start, is to get yourself a paper towel or a scrap or something so that you can take the time to see, because I don't want that on my fabric. Now, if you're having that over and over and over, what you want to do is empty your iron from the water and put in, maybe a half a cup of white distilled vinegar. And so if you put in some white distilled vinegar, it's going to stink. You're going to want to do it in a ventilated area, but you're going to be able to do what I'm doing here, give it a press, or give your steam the opportunity to work, and that distilled vinegar will work that out of there. So if you're having trouble with your iron, that's a good way to remember it. And like I said, make sure you're using the right kind of water. One would think distilled is what you want, but in some cases the irons don't like that. So you can see I've worked my way across here. It's not spitting up anymore. So I'm now just going to fuse, and I am not pressing hard. I am just letting it go into the fabric, and this is from the right side. So you can tell the little bumps here. As I pull this back, it's fusing. You can see that. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not pressing hard. I'm actually like gliding across the top of there so that I can fuse that. We're going to be stitching it, so it's not like it has to be super adhered to it. And the less I press on that steam button, the greater chance I'm going to have of not having any kind of an issue with that. I'm actually glad that it did this for you to begin with, so you could see what I was talking about. So then I can take this and turn it over, and I can give it some pressing, not ironing this time. Now, if you have any threads between your fabric and your fleece, especially on this white, it's going to show up. So you definitely want to make sure that you don't have any threads in there. Now, if you're using regular batting, you're going to have, and again it's optional, you're going to have used a little spray basting to keep these layers together. So now that I've got this here, I am going to be using my Frixion markers to mark with. And of course there's all kinds of stories out there about those, but these are markers, and I'll show you them in just a minute. And the markers, because they're more like a felt tip pen, they don't saturate down into your fabric. But what I do first is I'm using my misting bottle that is filled with Best Press. It could easily be the same, it's called Quilter's Starch Savvy by June Taylor. But this gives a nice mist. You might even be able to hear that. And this is putting a layer between what you're going to mark on there and your fabric. So it's kind of a barrier to keep that marking up on top of your starch alternative layer. So I've done one time there. You noticed I didn't saturate it. And I'm going to do it one more time.
Lee is very thankful for all of your tips, especially all of your ironing tips.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot of things that make all of our sewing and quilting and ruler work easier. And if we don't share those with you, it's not going to be something that you're going to find as an enjoyable experience. And once you get started on this, I'm all about easy. Anything that makes it easier. So you can see why I didn't feel like I had to really press this on, because now with doing this, I'm pressing that on there. So I'm finished with that, and we're going to go back and do our marking on our fabric. So it doesn't really matter where we lay this at this point. I'm going to take this white or this pink out, or pink. Well, it's red. And I'm going to show you the lines on my board. And I want to find one of the 45-degree diagonals that's right in the corner. You'll notice this one's not. That's right in the corner. So when I set that up, if I take this right to that corner, put this up, you'll notice that right down here, it's in that corner also. So I am then able to take my ruler that's not going to be quite long enough and set that on there, get some sort of an extension. I've got several rulers laying here.
Hold on, we do have a question. Can you use Best Press with what you just did?
Yes. Best Press or Starch Savvy, either one. There's probably other starch alternatives out there.
Thanks, Anne Marie. That's a great question.
Yeah. So I'm going to set this here, and I'm going to set this down here. So can they see that right there? So there's both ends.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll notice that right here it's not together. Well, I know this one is straight because I've got it lined up here. So I'm just going to move this other ruler so they're right side by side. Everything up there is even. And this is a Frixion marker. Now, I have a whole case of different colors. I'm going to choose my orange. And I want you to see that the tip of this is like a felt tip marker. So this is not the pens. This is not the Frixion pens. The pens, you had to kind of etch back and forth all the time, and you were literally scrubbing that ink right down in your fabric. You'll notice here that I can just cross that, clear across there. And now I'm going to do the other direction. So I'm simply going to rotate it 90 degrees. Find that same corner. Are there questions we can answer?
They just want to know what kind of Rowenta you're using, so I'm typing it into the comments right now.
Okay. So I am going to put this back the same way, and you can see when I put these together, this is lined up down here at this end. So I know that that's straight. So I'm simply going to line this one up. So this is straight across there. And now when I make this line, you can see how easy that is. So those of you that have used the ink pens before know that you really have to scrub. And this will iron right out. So now I have made the cross hairs here, so to speak, so I know where dead center is. And this is a 10-inch square, and that's a 12-inch square. And this is where this border ruler comes in, and this is a ruler that I designed. And you'll notice that on this, it starts down here and goes up to 12.5 inches. But then I also have this spot where it's 0, and it goes out each direction. So the easiest way to do is put this at 0. Here's my 0. And since it's a 10-inch and a 12-inch, I'm just going to mark that so that I have a dot in both directions. I'm going to rotate that fabric. I'm going to line up that 0 again, which you can see right here. I'm looking at these numbers now. That would be the 10-inch. The end would be the 12. That would be the 10, and you can even see the 10 there. And that would be the 12, even though that, I think I got that mark wrong. This one and this one. Okay, so that one we're not going to pay attention to. Now I'm going to use you could use a square up, you could use anything you wanted. I'm simply going to use my crosshair grid. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to line up this dot and that dot right over here. So I can draw this direction and this direction. The reason I'm taking the time for this is some of us are a little bit challenged by the geometry of what we're doing. But once we have worked with this kind of thing, you can learn to use your tools to your advantage.
As you're marking that, we have lots of questions. Do you mind if we take a moment to answer some of them?
Sure, go for it.
So, where do you get the felt tip markers from?
Well, again, ask at your local quilt store, and they are available on the website.
Another question, Kathy asked, do the Frixon markers ghost through if it gets cold?
That's the reason we put the 2 layers of the starch alternative. That way that ink is not down in your fabric. These are resting up on top, and because these are easier to use than the pens, you shouldn't have any issues. I don't have one of the pens here, but if I were to mark with the pens, you can see how easy I am using this and marking. The pens you have to scrub and scrub and scrub so that ink goes down. I will always say you need to check first. Check your fabrics. Make sure that it's not going to ghost. But obviously, in this case, ghosting is not going to be a problem. It's already white fabric. But I have had no problems. I have done a lot of projects using the methods that I'm telling you, and I've not had any issues.
All right, another question from Carolina. What ruler did you use and where did you get it at? And I believe she means the long...
This is called the border ruler, and it's available on my website, which is on the top of the handout, sobizmarian.com. Again, it's available through several distributors, so there's a lot of your quilt stores could have them in stock. If not, I would like for you to ask them to get it, because if they just contact me, we can get it in their stores. I use this so much, and you're going to see in just a minute how I use it. It's 2 inches wide. It has a 1/4 inch here. We're going to use this nice long line here in a second. It just makes it very easy to work with.
Thank you everyone for your questions. Keep them coming.
Okay, so back to this. I've drawn my 10-inch square, and I want to draw the 12. So here's the line, or excuse me, the dot. And you can see this right here. I need to line that up right on that corner. So this is lined up, that's lined up, and I'm going to push it clear out to here. Now, could we just draw an inch around? Yeah, you could certainly do this. This is something that I just like to make it so it's easy enough that I can get it drawn on there using something that's going to make sure it's square rather than just a straight line that might be. But you can see I'm putting this one. This is on the line that came out from the center, and this is already lined up. When you get a hang of this, you're just going to say, oh my goodness, that makes it so much easier than whatever I have tried. And you notice on your handout, you're going to need these lines anyway. So it's good to have them. That was the very first line we drew. So on this last one, it's pretty easy to get it lined up. And we know it's square because we used a square ruler to do that. Now when you're looking at this, you can see I have the big plus, but I don't have the diagonals. Or I have the diagonals, I don't have the plus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ruler and I'm going to go dead center through there, and right down here I've lined it up with the line that's there. So I'm just going to come right down here, rotate that. You could use your square up to do this also. So now the only lines that we don't have are this line in all four positions and all of those dots. And you're probably looking at that going, oh my goodness, all of those dots. It's not going to be that hard. I'm extending these lines down. These dots were just drawn on there. They were not put on there. I could take the time right now. In fact, I'll just turn around here so you can see this. This dot we don't need. Got rid of that pretty simple. That dot I don't need. And this one right here. So you can see how easy that was to get rid of those dots. I just touched it with the iron and they're gone. Now, we want to have dots in each corner, which we wouldn't have to mark, but I'm going to. And then I'm not going to use dots like I did here. I'm just going to use slashes. In other words, just a little hash mark. These dots are 1 inch apart. So I'll pull this over so maybe you can see it better. 2-inch ruler, line down the center. I'm going to lay that right on top of that line. Hash mark, hash mark. Move it over to the hash mark, hash mark, hash mark. And look at that. The line we drew in the center, right where it's supposed to be, so we just move over because that line's already there. Actually, it's not here on this one. Now, next week, I will be showing you how I came up with this. And it involves using my templates, a 12-inch drawing pad, and my stitching line disc. Because you can't just start doing this. Now we're going to go the other way. You can't just start doing this and hope. Hope is a wonderful word, but it's not going to work if you just do a lot of hoping. You got to do some drawing. So next week I'm going to show you how I did that so that you'll know how you can also become one who actually is doing some designing. Because if you look back at the picture of this project, you will notice that everything came out symmetrical. And the corners, the hearts are in the right position, they meet together, and that's how we will get the point across so you can see how we did this. So now that I've got everything marked there, we're ready to do some stitching. So we're going to take this back over to, you're just going to have to scoot behind me there. And I want to show you the project again so you'll see where we're headed. What we're going to be doing today is the center and this extra fill or padding stitches. And while I've got this up here, I want you to notice those padding stitches do not come in and touch. They are going to stop 1/4 of an inch away. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. I've really missed being with you guys. It feels like a big community that I've never seen your faces, but we have a lot of fun working together. So the first thing I'm going to do is set my foot down. And I'm going to show you something that will happen because people talk to me about this when I'm out doing classes and in shows and events. And that is the fact that I've got my foot up here, and if I go to put this down, this stops right here. And people will say I jammed my machine. And it's only because you have to put the foot down first. I have left my thread underneath, which in this case is a white thread. Are some of you out there yelling, no, 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 don't go any farther. You don't have your backing. Which I don't, so I've got to get that. So what I'm going to do with the backing, I should have shown you this before, is make sure that any threads are off of it. And because of the sizing, it's 2 inches bigger all the way around. So if I was up on my cutting board, this would be real easy for placement. But I can do this right here because my ruler is 2 inches. I'm just going to lay this right here and pull this right down. Check it on that side. And we are good to go. So this is placed dead center on my backing. Now some of you may feel more comfortable if you put a few pins on the outside corners. And so I'll just put a couple of pins out there to hold these together. Of course, if you wanted to, you could even spray this so it would stay together. Those of you that have friends in your sewing room, well, four-legged friends I'm referring to, are probably like me. I have to keep my pins hidden, and I always make sure I know exactly how many I have out so they don't have any on the floor for a playtime. So now back to our center. I'm going to set this down. My thread on the back is long. I've left it long on purpose. So I'm going to rotate my hand wheel by hand 1 complete time, and I lift up and I'm going to pull up, and you can see my thread, probably not because it's white, but this is what's called flossing to get your bobbin thread up. Because I left it long, all I have to do is pull out like that, and now both of those threads are out. I'm going to hold on to them to secure them later, and I'm going to put my needle back into that spot. So now it does not matter which size you use first, the 2-inch or the 4-inch. I'm going to start with the 2-inch, mainly because it looks like my 4-inch has taken a walk. There it is. Okay. I have a nice little You can get these, if this is a Sew Steady product also, but you can see the templates that I'm using, I can just set them in there so they're nice and at hand, and I don't have to worry about where they are. So I've got this stabilized. I've already tested to make sure my foot is at the right height and that my stitch quality is perfect. Pulling to the back in the right way, making sure that the threads look good. And what we're going to do is start dead center. And so this particular template has tape on both sides because we're going to use it both ways. So it doesn't matter which way you set it on there first, but we are at the bottom. And the cool thing about this, I'll pull this out here again, hopefully you can see that line right there. That line, if you were to extend it, this and this, dead center is where our needle is. So to get this straight on here, I have a line up here that I'll line up with that line. I have a line here that I'm lining up with this line and that one right there. So now I'm pulling my threads so that I'm not going to stitch them in. I have my needle set for the down position, and you'll notice up here I have my thread. This particular machine has a rack like this, so I have my thread up here. Now if you don't have something like that and you have a challenging thread, you can get one of these cone holders that will work for any size of thread. It will also work for the small spools, but get the ones that are heavy. You can see this is metal and it's heavy because that's going to keep it from dancing all over the table. So if I didn't have this and I had a cone like this that I'm going to use for my white thread, I wouldn't be able to do this on my regular machine. So this is why I would have that cone holder over to the side, and you can see it's higher, so when I pull that thread up, I can thread it through there and it's going to be a good release. And I will tell you, on things like metallic threads and decorative threads, it's the ticket. It just really solves a lot of problems. So are we ready? We are going to start and stitch up to the top. I'm going to take my template out, flip it over, and in this curl here, Leonie West has designed these so it couldn't be easier. I just set that around and I match up those same lines. This line, and this line back here, and we're back to center. Now if for some reason you're not back to dead center, get back to dead center. But I am. I like to do opposites first.
Why?
The reason I do the opposites first is a lot of times when if it's not a spinning design, which you have to go around, this is going to stabilize this fabric and this fabric, and then I can go back and I can do this. If I worked my way around, sometimes, as you can see, I'm going to work, if I'm really pushing too hard, I'm going to work around, so I'm going to have a ripple on the last one I do. So if I do opposites first, it stabilizes. I'm back to the center of the heart. I pull it out and just flip it over, hook that back around, line it up, and line it up. Bingo, we have two finished. Now I could just rotate this and do that, but I personally am better doing the up and downs, so I'm going to actually rotate my fabric also. Whatever works for you, I'm okay with that. There's a line, and there's a line. Take it out, flip it over, come back. I'm going to slowly just stop right there to get this thread out of the way. And I'm going to rotate this around, just kind of pick it up. Again, move my thread out of the way, line up my lines, rotate it around. Now you will notice that every single one of those has a little bit of an overlap. For some of you, you would have probably stopped on the second one or the third one when you saw that overlap thinking you'd done something wrong. Well, if they all have the same overlap, it's just the way the design works. So now I don't have to stop or anything. I'm going to get my 4-inch heart. I'm going to set it in there. I'm going to line up the same lines there and right back there. I'm doing a big heart. I take this out. Again, I'm lining up here. And if you can't tell that, take the time to turn it so you can. Sometimes seeing around the side, it's not the easiest. If you were here with me, I'd be asking you right now, which one am I going to do? But I'll just tell you, we do the opposites. And notice how I'm kind of pulling on this. This will even line up with that outer edge there because of the measuring that we've done. Lined up, and scooch just a little bit to line up. Pull it out. Turn it back around. Get that thread out of the way. And I am going to show you how to secure that because some of you probably haven't been with us before. And I want you to see how easy that is.
We love seeing where you're all from. We've got Canadians and people from Australia. Thanks for joining with us.
Some of you are ready to go to bed. Some of you just got up.
Some of you are going to the grocery store.
Is that you, Megan?
No.
Oh.
We've got Leslie from Australia. She joined us for a little bit, but now she's going to the grocery.
Okay, well, she can catch it later. Now, if this is like some of your first work, I always tell people, don't worry about your stitch length. Worry about your technique. Stitch length will come. I do like to set my machine to a medium speed. And hey, wait on it. I turn my foot control around to the back. So the high side is closest to me. And that allows me to press it clear to the floor. So you hear the same speed all the time because I'm pressing it to the floor. And that was the best technique for me to be able to learn to get my stitches of a good size. So work on your techniques first, meaning following the templates because I'm just pushing to that outer edge. And then your stitch lengths will come. Now I have raised that foot, or that needle, excuse me. Now I'm raising the foot, and I'm going to pull this out to the side, and I'm going to trim that thread. I'm leaving this one about 6 inches so I can still pull that up. And you'll notice I got the 2 to start with, and the 1 that I just finished with, and the other one is on the back. So what I'm going to be using is my curved needle to secure that thread. So I'm going to take all of these threads here. I'm going to trim them so that they're about 6 or 8 inches long. I'm showing you this because this is my fun little thing. I use Kleenex holders for my trash cans, so I have them on all my machines. So it's a good way to recycle, and it's so convenient for your threads. So I'm taking those 3 threads from the top, 2 and now 3.
Oh, tell them your little tip on how to get the thread through there.
Okay, well, I'll cut it again so they're all even. You didn't see me do this, but my tip is, this is my needle. Nobody else uses it. That's the eye. I put it in my mouth, and there is now saliva in there, and it will pull those threads through like a magnet. So you can see those went through a lot easier. Now I'm going to take this and go right down that center to the back. It doesn't have to be a curved needle for this step, but you might as well use it because you're going to use it in the next step. So now that I've got all of those, I want to take the time to see that I pulled them all through. Don't stop at that. So now They're all pulled through. So I'm just simply going to flip this to the back and find that 4th thread. I guess I already have it. So I've got a white one and a red one in each hand. And I'm just going to do a knot. Don't pull it too tight. You might break your threads. Do another one. Some of you are going to want to do 3 because you just like to have more security. I'm going to stop at this. You see I've got one thread that's longer, so I need to come back in. That was the one that was on the back by itself. And I'm going to put that needle eye. And I know you can't see it on this crazy background. But I've got all 4 of those threads in there. And right beside where that knot is, I'm just going underneath the back layer and about an inch over, pulling it up. And before I cut it, everything is down in between, but before I cut it, which is right there, I'm going to give just a little bit of a tug so that that fabric pulls up a little bit. So when I cut this, get some good sharp snips, it now pulled right back in underneath there. So the tail is buried. It's not going to come out. That thread is going to stay in there. So we're going to flip back and we're going to change threads to that white thread. You can use whatever you want. I did not mention needle size, but I like to use a size 90 top stitch needle. And that's because of the eye being larger and an oval. Now while I'm threading this, let me tell you that the action for a needle in any type of sewing is all in the eye. We always look to see if the point of the needle has been hit or whatever and causing it to give problems. But the most important spot is the eye of the needle, because that's where the thread goes through and actually abrades against the top edge of the eye. And when you start seeing those little willy worms coming up at you where the thread is shredding, you'll blame it on anything and everything, and all it is the eye is worn out and you need a new needle. It's just sharpened up this top part of that eye, and it's making that thread, the outer edge of the thread or the outer layer of the thread, come off. It's just shredding it right up. So that's a little bit of information on that. I want to put my thread through my ruler foot, and I'm going to go to one corner. So if you were looking at your directions and you've already printed those off, we are now down to 7 and 8. And what we're going to be doing is, again, this is why I didn't want you to do dots, because it's important to get dead center. And I am going to pull that thread up, and because I left it long again, I can floss that through. So I'm pulling this out. Uh-oh, my thread's caught. There we go. Another reason we want to use a cone holder. Okay, so my needle is down there. I've got control of both of my threads, and at this point we're using that 12-inch arc, the straight edge. We're going to find our spacing gauge, and again I've got all of these templates over here, and that's why I want my spacing gauge to have a little ribbon on it. Now we got something new coming. I can't release it, but just keep watching. That'll be a good thing to keep track of your spacing gauge. So I'm going to set this right by that edge of the foot. And in the instructions, I'm going to read them to you so you'll understand what I was referencing. It says, use the 12-inch arc template as a straight edge. Place the needle in one of the corner dots of the 10-inch square and bring up the bobbin thread, which we've done. With the ruler foot and needle down in a corner dot, place the straight edge against the side of the foot. Now most everybody, when they do this, they put it on this side. Now if you're used to putting it on this side, that's fine. Most of the time we put it onto this side. So it says put it against the ruler foot. Use the spacing gauge to measure 1/4 of an inch from the center square. So down here in the center, we are going to be measuring so that one edge is here and it allows the 1/4 of an inch. Now you'll see that this ruler is just a little bit short, but I'm going to show you how to compensate for that. So we are going to use that to measure that 1/4 of an inch, and we'll place the other end of the straight edge against the gauge. Stitch until the outer front edge of the ruler foot touches a part of the heart that you previously stitched. We're going to stop, and then we're going to retrace back to the corner dot. So we are going to work until this front edge here touches right in here. So it's going to come right in there, and when it touches, that means it's 1/4 of an inch away. We don't want to stitch clear in here. It looks a whole lot more inviting when we've stopped and we've given it a little bit of space. So in the case of this one that's long, you'll notice we've got this long line here. So I could even measure right here, and I'm still headed to center. And since I'm going to stop back here, it's not really going to matter. So if I were to do this, you can see I don't have it up there. But these 4 corners are the only ones that are that long, so we can just use right there at that spot. So I'm going to start, and Donnell, you're looking when the foot hits the red, you stop. So you can see it's hit here and it's hit here. Now, ideally, don't do what I did and move this, because we want to get right back on that stitching. So you don't want to move your ruler. So I'm retracing it, and I'm right back to that stitching. Now the next instruction, we are going to stitch right on this line to the next slash. Don't worry everyone, we're not going to do every one of these. I'm just going to get you going on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this to get my 1/4 of an inch, and I want to stay right on that line. When I get to the next dot or slash, I stop. Now, you can see that this is long enough because I'm still going to center. This is on the side of that. This is measured 1/4 of an inch from center. I stitch until I get to the red, and I go back, and I have to remember, slow down. It's always easier to go extra than it is to try and take out a stitch. So I'm going to mark this. I'm using that straight edge, and I'm coming right down that line to the next one. If you go a little bit too far, you can go back. Remember, it's always the center, 1/4 of an inch away, and as promised, this ruler is long enough now. Come in, stop when it is touching the red, and go back. You're on the line. You'll notice I never lay that spacing gauge down. 1/4 of an inch away from center, stop at the red. So what are you thinking about that, ladies and gents who are out there? This is a very fun and easy and quick way to pad around an object, because all I'm using is those, whoops, went a little too far on that. All I'm using is an equal number of measurements. Like at first I thought, well, I'll go 1.5 inches. You can't divide 10 by 1.5. So that's why these are 1 inch apart. And I'm going to measure here. And again, I stop when I get to the red. Went just a smidge too far, come back. I'm coming till I touch the red.
So while you're working through, we have a few questions.
Great.
Barbara wants to, oh, I'm sorry, it's not Barbara, it's Caroline wants to know what needle brand, because you were talking about needles earlier. Is there a certain brand you recommend?
Well, there's a lot of different brands. This happens to be Schmetz. You can use Inspira or Inspira, however you say that. Some machines use a specific brand of needle. Some machines have specific tips. Like there's one brand, I believe it's Janome, that uses what's called a purple tip needle. If I said the wrong machine, I apologize. I think I've got that right. But you're going to find that having the right needle is definitely an asset when you're doing this type of work. Now this thread that I'm using, you can probably tell has a little bit of a shine to it. So I'm getting a little bit of a pretty effect just by using the thread. And the brand of thread I'm using happens to be Exquisite. And it is a 100% polyester thread. Now there are a lot of people that have, they're a purist on quilting and they would only use something that is 100% cotton. I go for whatever look I'm looking for. So, you can do whatever you want that way. Now remember, the corners are too long, so I'm just going to measure on that line 1/4 of an inch away, and I'm going to stitch down till I come right between those hearts and the red gets touched with the foot. And we would be working all the way around. So you can see what that side looks like. You would just continue and keep working around. I'm going to do a couple more of them. When you get all the way back to here, you are then going to stitch this whole line again twice. And what that will do for you is give it a little bit of a heavier look, and it will connect everything. Because now you have stops and starts, stops and starts, stops and starts, and if you just go around it again, it will connect everything. Now I know you're super excited to learn how all of this was done. Trust me, it's all with your heart template. I'm going to show you how I drew it, how I measured it. That's all next week. We'll show you how to use the Quick Easy Miter binding tool to bring the back to the front to make this a real quick and easy project. And I think you'll have quite a bit of time between now and Valentine's Day to get a few of these done so that maybe you can use them for gifts for family, hostess gifts, whatever. And remember, hearts never really go out of style, so if you don't want to do them in red, you can do them in colors that match your kitchen, whatever you want. I definitely chose the white fabric so that you could see all of our markings very easy as we were doing this, because I'm finding out that through the camera it's better to have it as a plain fabric, even though I might have chose something with a little bit of a print. So anybody have any more questions?
One last one from Kathy was how many heart templates are in the set, and what are your sizes? And I know we talked about that earlier, but could you just review us?
Sure. There are 6 in the set. You can purchase them individually. Obviously you get a better deal if you purchase them all. They start at 1 inch and go all the way up to 6 inch. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that is truly the size. So this is a 4-inch heart. So when I do it, I don't have to figure out. If I were looking at the template and I measured it, it's bigger because there's 1/4 of an inch cut out, and that's why we use our stitching line disc when we're designing. So when I lay this on here, where I've stitched, what it finishes is the 4 inches. So that makes it really easy, and that works for all of your templates. That's the way that they're set up to work. Any other questions?
We know that it seems like some of you are having some issues downloading the directions. As soon as we get off this live, we'll look at that, make sure the link is correct. So we're on that. And
I will also put the link on my website. So you sewbizmarion.com, and it's SEWBIZMARION.com. And I'll just put it right on the front page so that you could get that handout there. Now the other thing is, Sew Steady, pardon my friends, Sew Steady is reaching 24,000 likes, and so they now have a promotion that is going on, and you'll want to get registered. So stay tuned for complete instructions. Check the Sew Steady site, and when you comment on there, you will get registered. So we're going to put up a photo of what the prize is going to be. It is a great prize. So you'll want to get registered there for that. And catch us at any of the events and shows. We're teaching classes at many of those. And you can go on. We got our own little class clown here. You can go on to the websites of like the Original Sewing and Quilt Expo, and you can see their events. We're going to be teaching at Paducah, so if you're going to Paducah, you can catch us there in a class. A lot of opportunities. Go to the Sew Study and also the Westerly by Me page, because those pages list the classes that are upcoming. And if your local quilt store doesn't sell these products, maybe you need to be the one that convinces them to get them and get going on them. There's a lot of advantages for your local quilt store to be involved with having classes and selling the products. So I want to thank you for joining us. It really is a lot of fun to share sewing and quilting hints and tips. If you have a question along the way, write it down, ask me next week. I love to try and help you with any of your sewing situations. Some of the things, it's just because I've been doing this for a long time that I kind of osmose into what happens to be the answers for them. And as I said, I would encourage you to test out your markers on your fabric first so that you don't have any issues there. But we will get that link up for the handout, and we will see you next week, hopefully right at 4 o'clock Eastern time, and we will finish up this project. So the way that I will finish tonight is I'll just say, well, bless your hearts.